Well, welcome. My real pleasure to be here and to be part of this conference. We're delighted. Blaine Aiken and I are involved with others in a young adult equipping ministry on Sunday nights right here, and this is the room that we use. So I feel at home, and this has been on our hearts for some time to broaden out the discussions that we have in this environment weekly to a larger group. And we wanted to, in particular, focus on some of the hot button issues that we've been talking about, that Joe Boo's been talking about, for example, sexuality and our society, our cultural response. And what we want to do is provide a biblical equipping for that. And no more important topic than media, and Joe's touched on media beautifully today already. And further to that, further to talking about kind of the background, the foundation of that, what I'd like to do is get into a little bit more of the nitty gritty of it. How's the volume? It's really coming at me, but I want to get away from myself, but that's how it goes. So the title here is Media Under the Microscope, and sorting the good from the bad and the ugly. And what I don't want you to think that I'm doing or leave with the sense of is I'm not dissing media. I'm not trying to put it down. I'm not being just the critic. Although I have some concerns, I think we have to be cautious. I think there's if we understand what's going on here with the media, we don't have to be afraid of it. We can actually use it, but we can be thoughtful users of it and not just passive consumers of it. This is the concern. If we're just going to consume it, we get caught up in it, we begin to reflect the values that are in media, which aren't so much biblical, I'm afraid to tell you, and we're not reflecting God's values instead. And so I have my credentials on there too, and my wife Tanya here hates that. She said, why'd you do that? You're just showing off. Totally. I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, and what that is, underneath my name there, it's Latin for was in school for a long time and worked really hard. And so the reason why it's there, though, is that I want to bring to your attention, well, one thing, there's a credibility factor in my medical talks, because in my medical world, that carries weight. But here, what we're talking about here today, I'm likening myself to Paul, who said in Philippians 3, when he's giving his own credentials, Hebrew of Hebrews, and he goes on and on, he says, and like him, I would say, I would say this is all loss, all rubbish, next to the surpassing greatness of knowing Christ. So that's my starting point, that's my foundation, that's the most important credential, not all that stuff. So I'm not an expert in media. I work at a hospital in cardiology, but just by virtue of being my age, being involved in the communities that I am, in church and otherwise, working in the hospital, raising 3 teenage boys, I'm in it, just like you are. There's no escape. There's no escape from it. And I have, for example, these are some images. I do Google searches. I do in my medical presentations, my PowerPoint presentations. We have the medical record, our whole, all of our hospital charts are on medical record on the computer. I do emailing like crazy every day. Right now, probably there's a ton waiting for me. I even text my colleagues. I have digital photos. I've got all my music, thousands and thousands of songs and albums on my iPod. I Skype with our son who was living in Ontario last year, and I have my prayer partner who lives in Toronto, and we Skype back and forth on a regular basis. And we have telemedicine, this upper image of telemedicine that we use. We read ultrasounds of the heart from the north. And so I'm involved in media myself in various ways, and I think it can be a wonderful thing, like tremendous. It's really simplified, made efficient, and made fun. I've made a lot of fun in my life. I think it's a tremendous thing. And so I'm not trying to be down on it by any means. But this is the bottom line. This is an image from a favorite movie of mine, Clint Eastwood, if you know him. He was the good in the movie, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And the bottom line from the Bible that I'd like to focus on is take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ from 2 Corinthians. So we can be this critical user and not this passive consumer. So the objectives that I have, firstly, would be to discuss the pervasive nature of media in our culture. Secondly, to touch on some of the dangers of particularly the high media diet and even the addictive potential there. And then thirdly, provide a framework so we can interpret, analyze, and work through some of the messaging, some of the worldview messaging that's coming through in various media, TV and movies in particular. So starting with the pervasiveness, these are images from my LP collection from the 70s, early 80s. And music was a giant, and remains a big part, but was a giant part of my life when I was a teenager. It reflected the culture, and I was in that culture, and it was very much focused on sex, drugs, rock and roll. Not that I necessarily was, but that was what we wanted, and we were thinking about it, and that was what we were in. And our music was all about that, and it was very powerful because it speaks to the emotion. And we went to the concerts. We had the posters on our walls. We talked about the singers, lead guitarists. We knew all the details, and it was a big deal. And I'm sure it is for you too as you grow up in your own music culture. But music in the 70s was a central cultural piece for us growing up. And there was Christian music back then, pop music. It wasn't near to the level it is today. And we just kind of made fun of it back then. Even though I grew up in the church and was involved in the church, we didn't give much heed to the Christian music. But it was a tremendous impact on my life, this kind of music. And I say that more out of embarrassment, really, because I've been more recently, I was asked and have been involved in an old-timers rock and roll band, and the Tragically Hip Replacements, we call ourselves. And so we're playing songs, from this era, and I'm learning the songs, and we're going over the lyrics, and realize, oh my gosh, is that really what that song says? I can't believe this great song from Led Zeppelin, is this lyric. I can't believe it. And so it's been disappointing when I see the poverty of thought and the highly sexual nature of that lyric that I kind of just got lulled into when I was that age, because it was a good beat and a great guitar solo, and so I just would memorize it and learn it on the guitar even, etc. And so, but music's been ramped up so much since those days with the digital era. These are just some icons from the iTunes, etc. What we have access to with incredible amount of downloading, sharing music, making your own playlists. It's really quite remarkable. I have my little iPod, and on this little device, that fits into your top pocket, I've got not only my entire LP selection of 400 records from the 70s, but I've got probably 10 times that, and all these podcasts. And I'm not bragging. I'm just saying it's incredible what can go into this little box here, and I get access to it, make my own playlists. It's tremendous, remarkable kind of time. But we have to be careful at the same time that we don't let it take over our lives. And I walk between my office and the hospital, and there's this music playing. And in the 70s, they used to be playing what we called elevator music, my parents' music, and it was disgusting. I just hated it, But now I'm walking through the High Center to the hospital, and they're playing music from the 70s, They're playing Hot Blooded, Foreigner 4 or whatever. So here I am listening to the lyrics that I used to sing and focus on as I'm walking, here and there in the hospital. I can't get away from it, it seems. And it's embarrassing to hear this stuff. And that music has become the elevator music of our current time. So what we need to do, though, and I'm a concern that I have with music, is that we still have an opportunity to turn it off. And so Joe Boot mentioned, how we engage media and how much. I would suggest that with the music, fantastic, there's a place for it, but there's also a time to turn it off and have that silence, have that quiet. And because we need to be able to hear that still small voice. And so this image here of, don't let the noise of the world keep you from hearing the voice of God, I think is very, very true. We have to go back to or reclaim or maintain spiritual disciplines of just quiet reflection, of prayer, of journaling, which is a pen and paper kind of activity where we can be open to the Holy Spirit and not be sucked into all of this pop culture really, which is coming at us incessantly if we let it. The other point is that I think it's important, as I learned in my rock band more recently, that we need to separate out the music, which is, I would define music as an organized sound, the the melody, the harmony, the rhythm, this aspect of what we're listening to from the lyric, from the content, if you like, from what's really being said here. I think it's important to separate that stuff out and just take a look at that lyric. Even if it's a great song, you love the beat, it's really doing it for you. What's it saying? What's the author of that song trying to communicate to us? Is it consistent with your own perspective on reality? What are the values that are being raised in that? Is it a pushback to the Christian worldview or not? And just because it sounds good, it's got a good beat to it, should we really be consuming this 24/7 like I was in the 70s? Is it really a healthy thing to do for me? So it's that kind of a question. I think that, there's some utility there. And so here's a question for you. Should Christians only listen to worship music then? Where you've got a lyric, for example, that's focused on the salvation message. What's your feeling? It's high quality music now. I mean, it wasn't in the 70s, but it's gotten better, I play in a worship band. But you don't think so? What would be the reason not to restrict ourselves to just the worship music?
I don't think music is bad in general. It's just most time that listen to music, it gets your imagination going, and once you're in a pleasant mood, it relaxes you. It doesn't necessarily have to be Christian music to feel like that. I don't think it's a sin to listen to somebody.
Yeah. In fact, one could argue, it's further to what you're saying, is that the music's a gift from God, and that all music is really worship. We're just, depending on what you're worshiping, it comes down to an authority kind of idea, again, that Joe was mentioning. But music can be a tremendous thing. It can be a wonderful thing. And think of the great classics, for example, and the remarkable music that wouldn't fit under this strictly, Christian salvation music or gospel music or whatever. So music is vast. And what I would say, and one of the points I'm trying to make in this time together, is that it's important to have at least a certain exposure, even to some of the pop music, even if you don't like it necessarily. Like, for example, I've got these three boys, and they put on music, and it really grates me, because we're driving to Jasper or whatever, and I'm playing my playlist, which is really great. And then they would say, well, can we put on ours? Just, all our oldest boy is really audiophile, so he puts on his. And all of a sudden, this incredible sub bass comes on, and it just shakes the car, and there's the drop, and all it's really tough to take, And but nonetheless, it has opened me up to these certain genres, and give me some language, and give me some certain appreciation, because I can hear it through his perspective. And I ask him, well, what is it that you like about this? I mean, and then he goes into some detail and tells me, well, if you listen to this and what they're doing here and what this represents and the RPMs they're playing this at or whatever, he's actually got lots of information on these topics of music, current music that I wouldn't gravitate toward at all. And it gives me a so is this escape? Well, sometimes it takes hours, though, at home to do that.
It's going to do it fast. It's just going to shut it down and restart it.
Okay. Not that that's important. So the.
You have to start your talk again where you started.
Oh yeah, no, I can wing it without the laptop, but it's kind of fun to have and does cue me. But and what I mean to say is then that here we have an opportunity to make connection points with people. Make connection points using music. And so music can be a tremendous opportunity because it comes up because it's so ubiquitous in our culture and all these different genres. And if we just limit ourselves to one subculture, if you like, the Christian praise and worship music only, and what will happen is we will have less ability to be able to interact, to be relevant to a broader society that we've been called to. We've not been called to make it this little cozy society and hide in the closet. We've been called into the world, and this is what we're trying to do here this weekend, is we're just trying to support the idea of being in the world but not of it. So we've got to be careful, but we've got to be out there. And so being out there means having a certain savvy, knowing what's going on. And even if it means not necessarily listen to rap all the time, but having a certain sense of what that is and what maybe some of the what some of the aspects of that music are. And I must say, my son has given me some music that I've downloaded onto my computer, and I've learned that there's some remarkable aspects to this music. So, and one of my more recent favorite songs in this modern playlist that I have, this up-to-date playlist, which I call the tens. Because how do you refer to this era we're in? It's not the 70s or the 80s. That was so easy. Or the 90s. It's the zeros and the tens. What do you say? Do you know? What do you say, Joe? What is this era we're in? The 2000s. So anyway, see if I can get this up here. I found some tremendous music there, and what's happened is, let's see if I can go through these again. How am I doing? So, for example, Kane West and his song "Jesus Walks." This is very much rap style music that I wouldn't have necessarily listened to at all in yesteryear. And I find this an incredible, powerful song of this person, the struggle that he's in his culture in the States there, working this out as an artist, as a musician, and trying to be put out his Christian message in that environment. And he's right there in the fray, and it's an absolutely stunning song. It makes me weep. I won't cry right now. I'll just move on. But there it is. So there is some value there too, in just being able to connect with people. Now we have the social media, and this is something. This is a giant area. I mean, there's different areas of different types of social media we have access to. Facebook is still the number one, they say. 2.2 billion users supposedly. 1 in 7 on the planet are using Facebook. So I had some experience with that. My 30-year graduating from high school some years ago. I was asked pre-grad reunion to get a Facebook account, and in that way we could kind of connect before we get together, share pictures, get updates, and this kind of idea. And I did do that. And it was kind of fun for about 3 days or so, and then I just don't have the time for it. But I can see some value, in that kind of a thing. Although I still have the account, and occasionally it comes up on my computer like everything else on my computer. I don't understand. It just has a life of its own. And then I just look and see what the feed is. And I can't believe what people are putting on there. And these are my people who are 53 years old too, and they're putting this stuff on there. I can't understand how they can have time and why I don't. But here it is, and this is part of the world, and this is an opportunity too. And we can see that as Christians. For example, there's a gospel opportunity. This is an image of the world. You can liken it as this internet, this cloud of communication. Edmonton's up in the dark, mind you, but otherwise there's this cloud of virtual communication around this earth, and the opportunity here would be that the gospel message could be that cloud. This could be a love and care and concern, and the biblical worldview could surround this world and transform it. This is a possibility, right? It is a possibility. And there are studies to show, good medical studies to show that the technological communication, the social media, can be very useful. For example, in the elderly population that are isolated in their homes or in hospital settings, and the social media, Facebook, Skyping, and the like, can really help to help people in that kind of environment, and help with their mood issues, their depression, and medication requirements, and the like. So there is opportunities here with this that can be a tremendous tool for us to consider, not just to diss and say, oh yeah, social media is terrible. But the reality, though, I think, is that we're not doing that necessarily. I'm sure it is happening, but this study was looking at how is social media being used, and really it comes down to the more trivial, the just sharing opinions and photos and likes and the like, and it's people are doing these little sound bites of their life. There's not really this opportunity, or they're not using it in the way that I've been suggesting. And my concern here with especially the liking and disliking Facebook concept, is that people can put their identity into that. If your identity is in the amount of likes you've got, or the number of friends, virtual friends you've got, or whatever, this is a soul-sucking exercise. This is a terrible thing, because that's not where our identity lies. You're not valuable because someone liked your post. You're not unvaluable because someone didn't like your post. You're valuable because you're a child of God, period. And this is our value, and that we have to have our proper identity, not based this way. And so I try to encourage my boys. Haven't necessarily, they were into it a little bit, but they just naturally gravitated out of it. They found it themselves to be a little bit a poverty kind of a time. And also what people perhaps don't realize is that it's a great opportunity for advertising companies. So they're using this. And I occasionally go on, not the social media so much, but when I do go on, I hit a site that's popular. I can't believe the pop-ups that are coming at me. It's almost scary. Sometimes I turn my computer off and walk away from it. It's like a demonic thing. But all the advertising coming at me because they're kind of following me, and they know what I like or whatever, and they're trying to sell me stuff, and that's happening. The social media is being studied. So people don't really realize necessarily, but this giant research is going on right now. When you're using it, when people are using it, they're recording, what you like, hits or whatever, and they're actually doing different studies. There's been a number of studies that have been published that have brought fury to the Facebook users when they realized that not long ago, I think it was just last year, 2015, there was a study done by a research communications group, and they chose this giant cohort on Facebook, and half of the group, they selected the news feed that was going to go on their Facebook page. And the news feed were going to be more negative, disaster type stories on that group. And the news feed on this group were going to be more happy, positive, development kind of stories. They chose this, and they divided it up just like we do a research study. And just like we do a research study. But they didn't ask anyone's consent, of course, And so and then they watched the result of this, over a certain period of time, what this kind of effect would be, and then they wrote their paper. It was very trivial. People who got the more negative had negative things to say, and people who got more positive had positive things to say. So it wasn't just about the news, but about themselves, about their life, about their time, and so it had a certain effect. And people were furious that was happening, but the reality is it is happening. And so I think we should be aware of that and be careful. Yeah.
Bill Gates bought 1.1% of Facebook a couple of years back for a couple $1 billion.
Bill Gates bought a certain percentage of Facebook?
A very small one. He has access to all of our information. And I read an article that the new way that the commercializing is going to go is that they're going to study you. And all the pop-ups that you get, like you said, on your computer, on Facebook, it's designed for you especially.
Yeah.
So they literally know who you are.
Yeah, so it's kind of tailor-made. So I go onto a site. I'm this certain age, a certain demographic. They know I like, having great hair or whatever, and they feed me certain things that they know I might go for. So this is the idea, because the bottom line is selling me stuff and money, and so we got to be careful. We're not being used here. This is a reality here. So, and there's lots of risky business going on here, particularly with our young people, our preteens and teenagers, and they don't necessarily realize the gravity of what they're doing here when they're posting pictures of themselves, or when we put comments out. It's out there forever, right? I mean, this is in Facebook. This is forever. Maybe Snapchat and the others are limited time, although I don't know about that, to be honest. But and so parental involvement is very, very important with the computer. And there's different ways of putting certain kind of filters on one's computer and the like. And I'd recommend that, or at least what we did in our family is we had the family computer in the kitchen, so it was right there, and I'm making coffee and Tanya's cooking up dinner, and the boys are on the computer, and it's just right there. So we have a certain sense of what's going on because the screen is something we can all have access to. There's a certain way of trying to keep things, and we had some codes to get in, and we had to kind of sign them in each time, and it brings a little bit of parental involvement into that whole thing. They're not just free to do their own thing. The other issue with the social media and just media in general is just how much time we're talking about. And this has been looked at in world surveys, and and they average them out, make these pie graphs, and they may be hard to read from where you're sitting, but the pie graph closest to me is the amount of media time in general, and the gray and the black portions of that pie represent the online time, and the colorful portions represent number one, the blue one, the TV, and the pink one was on radio, and then we have physical print, and we have games and consoles. And then the breakdown then just of the digital, which is the gray portion, is the next pie, and that's broken up into what aspects of digital that people are doing in terms of blogging, or are they online news, or are they on social media, or what have you, TV and the like. But the staggering stat here for me when I look at this kind of information is that what they're saying is about around 10 hours per day on social media of some sort, radio, TV, emailing, blogging, whatever it is, 10 hours a day. I work, and a big day for me, a really big day, is a 10-hour day. I put those in. So, and there's only 24, right? Last time I checked. So that's a long time to be on that, and you wonder how much of the workday is spent with these people, online. And that's I wonder about my staff sometimes. Like, are you doing my work? Or are you just kind of texting your boyfriend? But so we have to be careful with our time, and because we are stewards of our time, and that's very important. The Psalm 90 teaches us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. I think we have to give an account to our time as well, and how we use it, and not just trivializing it and idle words. We'll be judged by these idle words and activities. So the question comes up then in terms of time for a high-tech detox. And here's a survey that I found that I thought was kind of instructive. Here are the questions. You can't get through a meal without texting. More than one screen on at a time. Online in bed. Never turn off your phone. Each family member, like this family, on their own screen. If you said yes to any of these, then be concerned they had a different kind of. If you said to 3, or 2, then they had a different kind of a rating for you in terms of your potential addiction and the need for a detox. And so we're coming into Lent now. We're in Lent. And so I generally give up Brussels sprouts at Lent. But maybe media is something, or one aspect of media, is something we can consider, or in our own life, that maybe we could do that prayerfully, and then take up, for example, people complain to me they don't have time to read the Bible. Peter for Paul here, there could be an opportunity. This month, this week, I'm not going to do this, and in that time, I'm going to use it this way. And if we immerse ourselves in the Word, we will hear God's still small voice more likely than all this barrage of media coming at us. Any questions about that? Just the pervasiveness of it? Secondly, I wanted to look at some of the dangers of the heavy media diet. And it's not just about our time and the potential for time wasting, or having an embarrassing photo on Facebook that you can't retract, and Bill Gates is looking at it. It's not just that. It's also that when we're exposing ourselves this kind of way, particularly to the images, and we're talking, and Joe was talking about the images of media, the visual media. When we're exposing our minds to this, things are happening. Things are happening in our brains, and this is being understood more and more from a scientific standpoint, from a medical standpoint. And the changes that are happening aren't necessarily healthy changes. They're not changes that we want. We don't want to be remodeling our brains in this kind of fashion. Our brains are quite what we call plastic. And what I mean by saying that is not the material plastic, but rather the ability to change and be modified over time depending on stimulation. And so very much having this array of images was very unnatural in terms of our natural world to have this thing happening to us. Our brains will change as well. And so this array of images we get exposed to can actually set the stage for addiction. And so addiction medicine really kind of came out of alcohol and drugs. Nicotine is my area. Not that I do it, but I counsel smokers. Smoking patients is a big part of my practice, and this is a concern. I've learned a fair amount about the nicotine, how it works, and what's remarkable is all these substances, nicotine, heroin, cocaine, you name your poison, alcohol, junk food, all of these funnel in to a very similar pathway, a very similar circuit in its neurocircuitry in the brain, and are affected by those substances. Those substances over time, habitual time, affect that stuff, and we can actually measure that change. This is fairly recent developments in medicine, partly because of our imaging, our higher levels of imaging with magnetic resonance imaging, positron emission tomography, and other imaging techniques. We can actually see, if you like, see the brain better, different, and see it functioning under certain stimulation. And so we've understood or come to understand then that there's what we'll refer to as the addiction pathway or the reward pathway. The certain parts of the brain, very basal, very lower parts, more primitive parts of the brain have to do with this. And we share this with animals too. They very much have the addiction pathway. And we can study this then. We have animal models for it in the rats, the ram, and the like. So there's different animals that are being studied to develop understandings, and then those understandings are then tested on or applied to the human brain through imaging. So we've developed this kind of sense of the addiction pathway. And we understand that it uses a certain neuro hormone called dopamine, and dopamine is that search and crave neurochemical we have. Very important, I'm sure. But it's part of this pleasure circuit, and the pleasure circuit can be turned on, as I mentioned, by a variety of these things. There are natural stimuli for the addiction pathway, and food is one example of a natural stimulus. These are two graphs, and one closest to me is looking at the dopamine levels when there's absence of food and the presence of food and even the sight of food. And the sight of food, actually, the idea of food, just even me saying food to you if you're hungry, is going to give you a little bit of a dopamine burst, And if you're full, if you ate right now, you're full, and I say, come on, have one more bite. A thin mint, a very thin mint. One more bite. You say, no, I'm full. But then if I bring in the dessert tray, you can have some. Unless you're, like me. You got, really nerves of steel. No, but generally speaking, we have this hollow leg. We learned in medicine, this is a dessert leg, right? That's what my boys tell me. But the reason why we have that is that when new comes, novelty also gives the dopamine release. Not even if we're full. And so it's remarkable actually how that works, how we learn about that from food. And the other natural stimulus for this pleasure pathway is sexual intercourse, the idea of sex. And so sex has a very powerful effect on this pathway, as you can imagine, more powerful even than food. And so the concern then, understanding this, is when we add the very natural pleasure pathway and the sexual idea, we add that to media, we're in trouble. And so what happens with the internet pornography is that we have this incredible artificial supernormal stimulus that's coming at us. For example, every mouse click, potentially, every single mouse click, because novelty can happen with a mouse click. Every time the mouse is clicked, novelty can allow for dopamine release in the pleasure pathway if we're looking at internet pornography. And so this is an incredible addiction. One thing I say to my patients who smoke, the reason why you're addicted to nicotine is because of the time between you doing the habit, which is taking the draw on the cigarette, and the effect in the brain, on the nicotine receptors in the brain. And it's incredibly fast, just seconds, about 6 or 7 seconds, like bang, really fast. And the reason why that's the case is that our lungs, if we spread them all out, the alveoli all out, it's about the size of a tennis court. So it's this huge surface area. The drug, the nicotine, is drawn right into it. It has this huge surface area, hits that, it goes right to the brain. Right, past go, you don't collect $200, just bang, right to the brain. So it's really powerful, and it's powerful because it's so fast. So, 5-7 seconds or so. This makes that look like eons. Because here, we're talking about a mouse click, which is almost instantaneous. And they learned this in Las Vegas, where the gambling is going on. It used to be a lever, You lever and you hope you get all the plums or whatever. And not that I've done this, but Tanya does. But just kidding. It was her birthday and I had her pose. And I just love doing that. But now, instead of the lever, which takes a certain number of seconds for the plums to line up, or the bananas, now it's the mouse click. So you go to Las Vegas, I was a bit disappointed. I was hoping to see the room with the levers and everything like that. No levers. It's all just mice. The mouse click. And so what happens is, with the gambling addiction, is that they can touch the mouse and get the answer immediately. So they've coupled then the behavior, which is the mouse, to the result, which is your bananas or whatever it is. If you win, you lose. And the tighter you can couple that, the stronger the addiction. So, for example, who is addicted to medical school? Nobody. Years of work, So no one's addicted to that. They're doing it because they're crazy, but they're not addicted to it. But this stuff here, when you take that timeline and make it really narrow, really tiny, then you've got this potential for a very, very powerful addiction. And in terms of so it's the new crack cocaine. And the problem, of course, with it is it's worse than crack cocaine, because at least with crack cocaine, you run out, you got to go and try and talk to the dealer and buy some more. Not that I've done that, but but here, this is at home. This is on my phone. This is everywhere I want to be, wherever I've got internet access, or I can even download it or whatever. So this could be literally 24/7 if I wanted it to be. And so that's the other concern. In terms of the imaging studies, not to bore you with that, but I find it fascinating. And they've studied the healthy normal and the person who confesses to have this addiction to pornography. And they've done this imaging of their brains, and they've exposed them to different stimuli, different pornography images. And those people who have the addiction have this very large, the whole pleasure pathway lights up, large circuits light up, and it shows like a highway that's been set up. So you've got this white mud highway or gateway boulevard that's been set up versus someone who hasn't had much exposure to pornography, and there's this little path through the woods. And so you can still get there. Your red-blooded male, you look at pornography, whatever, it does something to you, but not the same as the person who's addicted to it. And the other thing that happens with habitual use this way is that it requires more. You've got this freeway of neuro circuitry that can take the images, and you need more to get the same kind of rush. And it's the same thing. Cocaine is the same idea. They need more for the same kind of rush. They're always looking for that great high that they first had when they used the drug. And of course, they'll never get it, and they die or whatever trying. But here then, what happens with people with the pornography is to get that higher rush, they go into novelty. So they move away from one type of pornography, and they move into something more shocking, let's say, more different, bringing an animal to it, or whatever it is, and it's crazy. But they have to keep ramping it up. They keep ramping it up, and they get into some very shocking, disturbing things. They need that to get the same kind of pleasure. And sometimes, even if it's a disturbing image, like violent image, which they are on these sites, violence against women, for example, that is what's needed now to get the same kind of rush. And so it's very, very demonic, very, very sick. What's happening. People are taking something that's very natural and moving it into something that's incredibly perverse on every single level. And what happens with this is it's not just the dopamine anymore, but there's a protein that gets laid down from the dopamine. Dopamine has a certain effect, and this protein, this delta phos-B protein, gets laid down on the circuits and makes them more permanent. And so it sets up more of a long term. So unlike, for example, nicotine, where you smoke it, it has its effect, it's gone. This then has a more permanent, lasting effect, and actually that's what causes the change to the neurocircuits. But enough about that. I'm going to bore you. But the one study that looked at this from Cambridge said what happens to the addict, the pornography addict, is they want more, they like less, and they're never satisfied. This is what happens finally. So they get into this point of being trapped. It's a perfect trap. So you're there, you want to be there, you don't like anything, nothing's going to be enough, but you want to be there. But you don't like anything, you're not satisfied, but you want to be there. So just wears you down. And what happens is that there is, understandably then, there's lethargy, there's reduced concentration these people have, decreased motivation, and interestingly, and Joe is alluding to this, is that they can't perform anymore sexually. They don't even want it anymore. So their libido goes. So if they have a choice between, this hot date and the computer, they're going to choose the computer. They get to that point where they actually can't, they have erectile dysfunction, delayed ejaculation, and they actually don't want sex, real sex. They just want this, because only this can produce that high level. Because the actual sexual encounter with an actual human being can't touch this level of dopamine that they can get. And so, doesn't matter what she's wearing, I mean, this level it's an artificial level that they are going for and they need. And they have to actually fast from. They have to break and have rehabilitation from. Just like any drug addiction or smoking, whatever, they have to go through a rehabilitation period. And then things can go back to more of a normal state. But the pornography addiction isn't just about a personal issue with lust or masturbation issue or whatever. This is a pandemic problem in our society today, and it affects everybody. Everybody in the room is affected by it. Like smoking affects everybody through the passive smoke concept, secondhand smoke. So even if you don't smoke yourself, someone else that smokes has this effect, smokes in the room, and it has an effect on you, and we can measure that in smoking. But there is this in the society. Recent quotes, 80% of men, 30% of women every month are using pornography. That's a very high number. And men have they say about a 500 times greater risk of becoming addicted. We're wired differently, I guess. We're more visual perhaps, and so it really fits into that. But some of the problems here, they're vast, but it robs the man of their scriptural role in society. We're supposed to be protectors in society, and here, if we're looking at pornography online, we're predators. We're consuming. And so one-sided consumption, it's a cannibalism, if you like, of the human being. And it degrades women, of course. And there's concern and relationship then between pornography use and the addiction of pornography and how people then trivialize sexual assault. Because a lot of this pornography now that's being mainstreamed and being consumed, actually being defended in our society, defended. It's amazing. There are groups, very powerful groups that are defending this. It trivializes sexual assault. There's actually women that are these porn stars are actually being beaten as part of the whole thing. And this is part of the whole culture. And so there are people who says, well, yeah, there really isn't a rape culture, for example. There isn't really the sexual assault. And if you go to the battered shelters, battered women's shelters, where domestic violence is being dealt with, they'll tell you otherwise. And there are lots of good books. Here's Marianne Layden, excellent book on pornography and sexual violence and this coupling. She works in Pennsylvania. She's the director of the battered women's medical unit. And so that's her area. But she's very concerned that very much there's this direct relationship between the pornography industry and violence on women in particular, and the breakdown of the family. And so it's a big deal, and I think we need to be aware of it at the very least. So there are immediate choices. Jesus said in Matthew, you've heard it well said, do not commit adultery, but I tell you, anyone who has looked lustfully at a woman has already committed adultery with her in his heart. That's a very high bar that Jesus has put in place. But there's help. People aren't just left to their own resources. Here's a very good book that came out some 15 years ago. I've gone through with my boys. I'm currently working through it with my 15-year-old because we got to talk about it at the very least. there should be no taboo topic within a Christian circle. If we come at it from a biblical worldview, we've got to be able to talk about this stuff, and I think that can help, and it is. I think it is helping with them and the like. I will set no vile thing before my eyes, Psalm 101, and I made a covenant with my eyes not to look lustfully at a girl. So there are some scriptures that people can have in their minds, and they can be reminded of this when they're on their computer and they're supposed to be doing their work and they're thinking that maybe they want to do something else. We have access to books. There are Covenant Eyes. There are Strength for Fight, or other resources that are available online, and people that can talk to that can help. So there's opportunity. One doesn't have to be left in this, but at the same time we have to recognize it as a problem. And so there's a sexual addiction issue. There's a sinful behavior issue. There's emotional wounding. There's evil strongholds. The media has all this, So it's wonderful, incredibly wonderful, more than I could ever imagine, and incredibly terrible, and more than I could ever imagine. And there it is, because it's a tool, just like a hammer. You build a beautiful house, you just break someone's skull open. It's a tool, and we've got to be very careful how we're going to use this tool, how we're going to talk about the tool, and how we're going to move forward with this tool. Any questions about that? It's pretty cool, that medical stuff, eh? I'm very biased. So this last section then, what I want to talk about was some of the worldview messaging that's going on in media that I think is useful, because as Joe said, if we're aware of the issues, then it's not dangerous anymore. If we're not aware that there's messaging going on, then it's incredibly dangerous. We can get sucked into it, begin to reflect these worldviews ourselves. So in terms of a worldview, we've already had it defined for us, this picture of reality, if you like, answering the four questions of where we're coming from, our origins, the meaning and purpose of our life, and our morality, and where we're going. These are the kind of key questions that are being answered in every worldview. And the issue for us in Edmonton, here in Canada, and the world increasingly, is we're in the soup of worldviews. And Joe did break it down beautifully, into oneism and twoism. It's very, very useful. But of the oneisms, here they are, and there's more than that. And it can be confusing, especially when you get into some of the nitty-gritty of the different worldviews, and you can really, get lost in it. And the issue with worldview, which didn't come up so much today, but I think it's very important, is that worldviews very rarely, almost never, have been presented to me in their entirety as a consistent platform. If someone comes at me with a atheistic, humanistic worldview and they're consistent with it, almost never. What they do is they hold to an atheistic, humanistic worldview, but they come at me with all sorts of little puzzle pieces, if you like, from other worldviews, all together. Doesn't make any sense at all, but they just do it. They go with it, because we all do. We've got to be very careful, actually, with our own worldview, how we think, because very commonly Christians can bring in non-Christian ideas into their worldview. For example, the idea of karma. This is not a Christian idea, and yet it's very, very common that Christians will think, oh, you do your good works, and you get rewarded. You do bad works, they follow you. And this is no. Jesus said no to that. Okay, so we're not caramelized. Where we can't allow for other worldviews to come in and confuse our thinking. And this is very much happening when we live in such an environment, and we don't kind of recognize the worldview messaging that's all around us all the time. So there's a war going on of worldviews. There's no neutral territory. It's this or this. It's God's kingdom, other kingdom. It's very, very clear, and we have to have our feelers out, if you like, to be aware of that. This came home to me just in January. Our 15-year-old came home and said, I asked him, well, what are you doing in science? 'Cause I'm interested in science. I did sciences myself, my undergraduate, biochem. And I said, well, we're talking about science right now, and I don't know how he framed it again now. If he didn't say the word evolution, he just said cosmology, I guess. Yeah, cosmology or origins of life. Yeah, that's what he said. So we're talking about the origins of life. I said, fantastic topic. I mean, great. What's your curriculum? Do you have your book? He said, no, we don't use books. It's all, the prof send, or the teacher sends things online or whatever, and they've got little notes, and no one reads books anymore, it seems, which is a shame. because you can, coffee stain dog ear and write in them. But I said, so what did you cover then? He said, well, we're watching the Cosmos series. Has anybody seen the Cosmos? Seen it? Yeah. Yeah. So this is a very popular series, which is really a reboot from Carl Sagan from the early 80s, late 70s. And Carl Sagan came out with a series called the Cosmos back then. And his line, which is well quoted, was quoted this conference already, the cosmos is all there is, all there was, and all there will be. And then he says, and let's follow the evidence and see where it leads. So it's fantastic, because he says this statement first, the cosmos is all there is, all there was, all there will be, which sounds very kind of almost scriptural, and then we'll follow the evidence. So he's already starting with his premise, and now he's going to show you why. And so this is rooted in that series. And Neil deGrasse Tyson is the host. He's a astrophysicist, and he walks the student through. And what's the thing here is that the danger here is that it's not portrayed as entertainment. So this is not entertainment. This is portrayed or presented, marketed as a vehicle for learning about science, learning about the origins of life. So, okay, students, now we're going to learn about science. That's how it's. So this is the danger. If they said, "Hey, we're going to kick back a little bit. You're off this afternoon. We're just going to watch a bit of TV or whatever and just relax, chill, man." That's different. But no, they're going to learn science here, and so they're going to put on this program and learn science. And it's not science; it's sci-fi. And I watched an episode with Joel, our little boy, and it was incredible. I was embarrassed that they would do this. It was so sci-fi. There was zero science in the program, and it was all just speculation and very heavily laden anti-biblical, anti-God worldview. So much so that it was funny almost to a certain level. But I made some notes for him, and we talked about it. And I think there is value then in watching it. Go ahead and watch it. But watch it, from a biblical worldview just to see, oh my gosh, look what they're talking about here. And they're presenting this as fact like gravity. And actually they say that. It's like gravity. And I'll tell you, as someone who's studied science for many years, that's why I got the gray in the beard, it's not like gravity at all. And so there are these hidden worldviews. And this is a quote from a Maryland professor who said, "It's time to realize that the true tutors of our children aren't just school teachers or university professors, but filmmakers, advertising executives, pop culture purveyors. So Disney does more than Duke. Spielberg outweighs Stanford, MTV, trumps MIT." And those are American institutions of learning. And these are just images that Carl Kirby was showing that have very strong evolutionism worldview messaging tucked into the cartoons or pictures or films, and so it's going on there. It's good to be aware of it. I think one can still watch the films or watch the programs or whatever, but great to be able to say, okay, now this is a worldview coming at us here. This is why they showed us this clip here. That's where that comes from, and to be able to talk about it. So the worldview can be a bit of a mess, and without reflection, it can look like puzzle pieces on the floor. And what people do, and as I was mentioning earlier, is they pick up these different puzzle pieces, and only the Christian worldview do all the pieces fit together. So it's important then that we put these pieces together. And one way to get a sense of how they fit together is to look at the big picture. And what I do, I make a puzzle, is I put the edges pieces on first, and then I look at the image and try and put it together. It's called cheating. But so that's how I put a puzzle together. And we can do that too. And one idea that one can do is to consider the worldview and storyline. And this is an image of the classic plot line. And the plot line represents then the first of all the reality that's presented. What's the sense of the world that's being presented in this story, in this TV program? Does it jive with the reality where we live? Is it a real type of a exposure? Is fantasy? Secondly, what's the rub, or what's the conflict? What's the problem that's being presented in this TV show or movie? And is it does it fit with the human condition that we can relate to, or is it a trivial kind of a thing? And during this problem, during this escalating conflict in the story or the program, how is it being worked out? How has goodness come through? How is the morality being demonstrated? What are the values that you see in this show as you're watching it? And then what's the rescue? Every worldview has to answer the question, what's going to rescue you? So the Christian worldview, we understand that. We actually use that term, redeemer and rescue. But what rescues the protagonist or the people in this story? And it is that in other words, what's the God substitute that's going on in this story? And then likely where do they get resolution from? How do things kind of come back to? Or are we left hanging? Is it just left in a despair, or are things resolved and brought back? And where's the meaning and purpose in that? And then lastly, what's the ongoing result? How do you live your life differently after watching Cosmos? Or how does that affect you? Are you left with a sense of inspiration and encouragement in your life as you walk into Monday? Or are you left with despair or fear? Or if you Walking Dead? This kind of idea. So this is a way of thinking about story and breaking it down just into this simple but useful framework. And in terms of the Christian worldview, we can understand it. We can think of our worldview this way too, in terms of in the beginning God, in terms of the reality presented, the rebellion, the fall, if you like, for the rub, the cross of Christ for the rescue, the resurrection, how this is resolved, and our salvation that begins today, that we have now, and we move into eternal life with that sense starting today. And we can apply that then. That's that same when we look at TV, when we look at movies or hear story this way, we can take the Christian worldview and use it as our lens, if you like, or our comparison for looking at the story that's being presented to get a sense of what are the worldview imagery or ideas coming at me here, and are they in conflict with my worldview or not? Are they supporting, encouraging, and can I bring something out of this? So again, test everything, hold on to the good. And so, there's a variety of TV shows here, for example, that I've got, and they're popular TV shows. When we first moved here in the 90s, Friends was huge, and we watched that, and because we were at kind of that age at the time, and Tanya's still that age, but and we watched some episodes more recently, and we're kind of embarrassed. It's a bit like my rock music, I look back at this stuff and think, oh my gosh, how poverty. But not just to criticize it, but again, I think there's an opportunity, at least in some of it, to be aware of some of these. I mean, the most popular show right now on TV, supposedly, is The Big Bang Theory. And to be aware of that, to be aware of, what are they watching? What it was when people are talking about in the lunchroom, whatever, what are they doing? If you've watched a little bit of it, or even a YouTube clip of it or whatever, you can connect. And if you are aware of the reality being presented, the conflict, the rescue, the resolution, the result of those different programs, then you've got a sense of how that affects or how that relates to your own Christian worldview. And you have a if you like, a connect point to meet with somebody and to bring them closer to the scriptural perspective. When we shouldn't just allow ourselves to be, watching TV endlessly, though. And one way to put some kind of controls on it is to use, a personal video recorder, so that we can, tape certain programs and edit out the commercials and not get, lost in it all. And so we can become this critical user. See to it that no one takes you captive through hollow, deceptive philosophy, which depend on human tradition and the basic principle of the world rather than on Christ. And we can apply the same kind of concept then to movies. And there's different approaches to movies and TV, for that matter, from the Christian community. One approach would be to have a line and censor, some movies. And I think that's valuable. That there is some value. I think there are some movies and some programs that we just shouldn't watch. They're just demonic and demoralizing. But where you put that line, you won't necessarily find in the Bible where it says to draw that line necessarily. You have to make your decision. And there are different ways of making that decision. One is to learn a little bit about that movie or that TV program, and there's different sites one can go on. But one approach is to censor, largely, and then just maintain a small strip of movies or TV that we watch. Others is to have a less censorship. And that's kind of what we've done, a little bit more, a little less censorship, but we've made the proviso that we discuss everything, so that when something comes up and we watch things together, we are able to discuss it and talk about why that was wrong, why that was a stupid movie, why is Zoolander 2, I got conned into seeing Zoolander 2 with my boys, and we watched that, and it was just unbelievably bad. We kind of liked Zoolander 1. It had some redemption to it, a little bit of fun, but nothing in Zoolander 2. So, but why is that? Like, what's wrong with it? And so being able to have watched it and go through it and talk about it in this kind of concept in terms of the reality presented, the conflict, how things are resolved and the like, one has some language for talking about these things. And you can also get a sense then, for example, some movies like Prometheus, where this is very much the evolutionism perspective, and even the panspermia, which is, if you watch the movie, that's how the movie starts. This whole idea that the evolution theory is not a long enough time to allow life to begin here, and so we need more time, so life was come here from an alien, and that's how that movie starts. Or the Avatar, which is a pantheism, very much the native spirituality put into a sci-fi form. The Fight Club, voted #1 male movie every year, for the last 15 years, but it's very much a social Marxism concept of, or Marxism anyway, of leveling the financial capitalism playing field and using this broken support group as a means to doing that. Harry Potter, very much, the occult, and the Kingsman, a nod at James Bond, but very much a mockery of morality. And if you watch that movie, we were in, my son and I were together, we watched this together. I thought it was going to be like a James Bond movie. And the protagonist literally saves the world in his own words, and his prize is to have anal sex with this princess. That's how the movie ends. Unbelievable. I couldn't believe my ears or eyes that this was being talked about, that this was the final prize that the Bond character would get. And what's the messaging going on there, So it's strong, it's powerful, and it's good to be aware of it. 50 Shades of Grey. It's not a movie I would watch, but there it is, and very popular. I was in New York with my oldest boy when that came out, and it was Valentine's Day, and we had gone to see Mamma Mia, and didn't like it very much, and so we were kind of commiserating Times Square and kind of going back to our hotel. And we saw the movie theaters, this giant movie theater, like everything there. So we go in and see and we watched Kingsman actually, but the theater was packed out, and they ran out of popcorn. Running out of popcorn, imagine. A movie theater, and this giant movie theater, like a West Edmonton Mall of a movie theater, they run out of popcorn. I said, what's going on tonight? Well, I said Valentine's and 50 Shades of Grey just came out. So everyone's going to see it, So 500 million copies of the book sold. It's a huge bestseller, and you wonder, what's the reality being presented here? What are the conflicts, the rescue, the resolution, the result of watching such a film? Particularly in light of what's happening in the internet pornography, and when we normalize violence to women, which this movie does, and there may be a time then when we say no, we won't do that. We won't watch that kind of a film, and we must speak out against that kind of a thing. So there are books out, and they talk about the reality of movies being more than just entertainment, and there's messaging going on there. We have to take them carefully. And there's different sites that one can go on, for example, Common Sense or Plugged In, which can be useful. When you go on these sites, for example, there's apps one can have if you want to kind of check out the film a little bit before you go in. Not in terms of ruining the punchline, but just getting a sense of the plot summary, the positive, negative aspects of the spiritual content, sexual content, violence. If you have children you're taking to a movie, kind of embarrassing, and if you're at home, and you kind of, there's a sex scene, you put it on fast forward, it gets worse, So just, don't, just try to not show them those kind of things. But, and then we do go out to films. When we do go out to films, not that often, but on occasion, we make it a family thing. So we get dressed up, go for dinner, and make it a memory, so that it's a time that we do it. And here we're going to see Spectre as a family, and there's some problems in that movie. I'm not saying that it's not a Christian film. But we watch it, we go with it with the idea that this is entertainment and a certain kind of a persona character that I kind of grew up with. And so but we make it a time and we talk about the whole thing at the same time. So I think that adds a certain redemption to the movie as well when you can do that. So again, we want to take every thought captive, and I'd be happy to take a few of your questions captive, and if we have, we've got a few minutes here to answer some. Any thoughts or questions or concerns about media and how we're being inundated with it, or how we respond, or the dangers of it? Lots of info. Hope not too much. It's a vast topic, and this is actually just one aspect of the topic.
I think a lot of people are not saying anything because we're all using it so much. So
Yeah, well, no. And again, I'm not trying to say that it's wrong or bad, but that one has to be careful. It's like driving. You gotta have your eyes open. Not text. Both hands on the steering wheel, seatbelts on. Just be careful. Airbags. Yeah. What was that?
all depends who texts you.
Yeah. So as long as one's careful, I think you can drive. And still, some things happen, but driving is an incredible thing. And we enjoy driving, but we have to be careful, follow the speed limit or whatever. And this is the same kind of idea, just to suggest that we be careful and not just have this open arm passive consumption. Recognizing that there's messaging, there's advertising, there's research, there's addictive potential. Well, if there are other questions later, I'm happy to answer them or try to, but I'll let you go at this point then. Thank you.